Over 90% of our viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you love these stories, please subscribe. Your support is the inspiration that keeps this channel alive. The first time I saw my own face reflected in Karen Holloway's sunglasses, she was smiling. Not because she was happy, because the painter standing behind her had already started unloading ladders, buckets, and rollers onto my front lawn while she held a clipboard like she'd just conquered a foreign country. My orange cedar roof, the same roof that had survived 15 hurricanes, 2 hailstorms, and 12 years without a single complaint, was apparently now an aesthetic emergency. She even congratulated herself before speaking, like she'd rehearsed the moment in front of a mirror. 3 months later, people were driving across town just to park in front of my house, not to admire my roof, to play a neighborhood game that became known as Find Karen. And by then, Karen would have happily paid me $10,000 if I had agreed to make her disappear. My name is Ethan Cole, and until all this happened, I thought roofs were supposed to keep rain out. I didn't realize they could also destroy an HOA president's reputation. The strange part wasn't the violation letter. Anyone living under the Oak Ridge Hills Homeowners Association eventually collected one like an unwanted birthday card. Sometimes it was because your trash can sat outside 12 minutes too long. Sometimes it was because your mailbox leaned 1 degree to the left. Once, my neighbor received a warning because his wind chime sounded too optimistic. No one even knew what that meant. What made my situation different was the timing. My roof had been orange since the day I bought the house 8 years earlier. Not bright neon orange, not traffic cone orange. It was a warm cedar clay color chosen by the previous owner because it matched the sunset over the lake every evening. Half the neighborhood had complimented it over the years, including Karen herself during a block party, long before she became HOA president. Now, according to her latest crusade, the exact same roof was suddenly lowering property values. Convenient. I found the official notice folded neatly beneath my welcome mat after coming home from work. Notice of mandatory corrective action. The words were bold enough to look like a criminal indictment. The letter claimed my roof violated the association's updated harmony standards. According to Karen, every homeowner now had 30 days to repaint any roofing material that displayed overly dominant earth tones capable of distracting from neighborhood uniformity. I read that sentence 3 times. It somehow became dumber every time. I walked across the street and knocked on my neighbor Gus's door. He answered while holding half a sandwich and immediately asked, "Roof?" I blinked. "You got one too?" He laughed so hard he nearly dropped the sandwich. "No. I mean, you're the 6th person today asking about your roof. Karen's been walking around with paint samples like she's auditioning for a decorating show." "What did she say?" "That your house looks aggressive." I stared at him. "My roof is aggressive?" He shrugged. I didn't ask follow-up questions. I wanted to keep my IQ. That became the joke of the week. Every evening another neighbor wandered over pretending to water flowers just so they could ask what color Karen wanted me to choose. One suggested oatmeal beige. Another recommended slightly disappointed khaki. Someone else said Karen probably wanted every house painted the exact shade of unbuttered toast. Even I laughed. Until the second letter arrived. This one wasn't funny. It came with a fine, $500. Failure to begin repainting, Karen wrote, demonstrated intentional resistance toward community standards. Intentional resistance? I hadn't even hired a painter because I was still trying to figure out how someone repainted cedar shingles without ruining them. When I called the roofing company that originally installed the roof years earlier, the owner nearly choked after hearing the demand. "You repaint cedar?" he repeated. Apparently. There was a long silence. Finally, he said, "You don't." "Excuse me?" You replace it or maintain it. You don't cover quality cedar with paint, unless you're trying to make every roofer in America cry. That wasn't exactly the answer Karen wanted. I thanked him and spent the evening reading through every page of Oak Ridge Hill's governing documents. Not because I expected to find mercy, because Karen always loved quoting rules. If she was hiding behind paperwork, maybe the paperwork had something she hadn't noticed. After 2 exhausting hours, I discovered something interesting. Not helpful, just interesting. The updated guideline never actually required the roof to be painted. It required the roof to appear as an approved visible color. Appear. One word. That single word sat there quietly, almost forgotten between 2 paragraphs about neighborhood harmony. Most people would have skipped right over it. I highlighted it anyway. The next afternoon, Karen appeared while I was trimming hedges. She didn't bother saying hello. I assume you've selected a new color. I've selected something. Excellent. You'll love it. Her smile widened. I knew you'd eventually understand. I smiled back. I don't think we're talking about the same thing. She frowned for just a second. Then she dismissed it with one of those little laughs people use when they believe they're smarter than everyone else. I'll schedule an inspection next Friday. I'll be ready. I certainly hope so. She walked away looking unbelievably pleased with herself. Gus, who had apparently witnessed the conversation from behind his garage while pretending to fix absolutely nothing, wandered over after she disappeared. You've got that look. What look? The one you had when the neighborhood kids kept stealing peaches from your tree. I smiled. They stopped. They also apologized. They learned. Gus narrowed his eyes. Ethan. What? What are you planning? I looked toward my orange roof glowing under the afternoon sun. I honestly don't know yet. That wasn't entirely true. An idea had started forming. Not a complete plan. Just a tiny, ridiculous thought that should have disappeared the moment it entered my head. Instead, it kept getting funnier. And every hour that passed, it became harder to ignore. The idea should have stayed ridiculous. Instead, it followed me everywhere. I thought about it while driving to work. I thought about it while making coffee. I even caught myself laughing alone in the grocery store after imagining Karen's expression. By Thursday afternoon, I finally admitted the truth. I wasn't trying to repaint my roof. I was about to turn it into the most unforgettable thing Oak Ridge Hills had ever seen. The only problem was figuring out whether it was possible. So I called the last person anyone would expect. Martin's Custom Print Studio, a cheerful voice answered. Hi, I said. This is going to sound strange. We specialize in strange. I need thousands of weatherproof stickers. No problem. They're all the same picture, even easier. They're tiny. How tiny? About the size of a postage stamp. A short pause followed. What picture? I looked across the street. Karen was walking another homeowner through a flower bed inspection while pointing dramatically at a tulip. I quietly snapped a photo through my living room window. The woman in the blue blazer. Another pause. Then the man laughed. Oh, this is personal. You have no idea. Martin invited me to his workshop the next morning. The place looked more like a laboratory than a print shop. Rolls of vinyl lined every wall. Industrial printers hummed continuously, producing banners, decals, and vehicle wraps. Every surface was covered with color samples. He examined the photo. Is she famous? Unfortunately. Do you own the copyright? I took the picture myself. Perfect. He zoomed in. Karen's expression couldn't have been more perfect if I'd staged it. She wore the same smug smile she used whenever handing someone a violation notice. Martin looked at me. What exactly are you covering? My roof, he stared. The whole thing? The whole thing. You realize that's around 6,000 shingles. I counted. You counted your shingles? I've had a stressful week. Martin rubbed his forehead while trying not to laugh. This is either the funniest thing I've ever heard, or the beginning of a criminal documentary. I grinned. It's completely legal. How? I'm not painting anything. He leaned back. I suddenly need to hear this story. After listening for 20 minutes, Martin finally slapped the table. You know what? What? I'm giving you the employee discount. You don't even know if this will work. I don't care. He pointed toward the photo. If she really ordered you to repaint a perfectly good cedar roof because she doesn't like orange, she did. Then I want to help. 3 days later, 12 heavy boxes arrived at my house. Each contained thousands of laminated, UV-resistant photo decals. Every single one displayed Karen's smiling face. Some neighbors noticed immediately. Gus wandered into my garage while I was opening the first box. He picked up one sticker, then another, then another. He slowly looked up. Ethan. Yeah? Why are there 6,000 tiny Karens in your garage? Approximately. He blinked. You counted? They came in numbered stacks. No. He shook his head. I mean, why? I handed him the HOA notice. He read it. Then he looked at the stickers again. Then back at me. A smile slowly spread across his face. Oh. Another pause. Then his shoulders began shaking. Within seconds, he was laughing so hard he had to sit on a toolbox. You've lost your mind. Probably. I support it. That evening, the two of us climbed onto the roof with soft rubber rollers, microfiber cloths, and enough bottled water for a marathon. Applying the decals turned out to be strangely relaxing. One shingle, one Karen, another shingle, another Karen. Hour after hour, row after row. From the ground, the roof still looked mostly orange. The individual photos were too small to recognize. But viewed from a distance, something unexpected happened. Thousands of tiny, smiling faces blended together into a completely different shade. It wasn't orange anymore. It looked beige. Exactly the dull, lifeless beige from Karen's own approved color palette. I climbed down the ladder just before sunset. Gus stood at the curb with his mouth hanging open. I don't understand. What? It actually looks normal. It does. But I handed him a pair of binoculars. He focused on the roof. 5 seconds later, he almost dropped them. No way. He looked again, then burst into uncontrollable laughter. My God! What? It's her. Every single shingle. He couldn't finish. He was laughing too hard. The following morning, Karen arrived precisely at 9 for the scheduled inspection. She stepped out of her SUV carrying her clipboard with the confidence of someone expecting total victory. I greeted her from the driveway. Morning. I hope you've made the appropriate corrections. I worked all weekend. She barely looked at me. Instead, she tilted her head toward the roof. Then she smiled. I have to admit, she marked something on her clipboard. This color is much more appropriate. I was hoping you'd approve. I do. She signed the inspection sheet without another glance. "Congratulations, Mr. Cole. Your violation has been resolved." I thanked her politely. She drove away. Gus emerged from behind his mailbox the instant her SUV disappeared around the corner. She didn't notice. No. She actually approved it. Apparently. We stood there silently for another moment. Neither of us realized someone else had been watching from much farther away. Across the small lake behind our neighborhood, a drone photographer had spent the morning capturing aerial footage for a local real estate company. He had unknowingly photographed my roof from nearly 200 feet above. And from that angle, the image was impossible to miss. The internet discovered my roof before the HOA did. I had no idea. Monday morning started like every other workday. I poured coffee, fed my old Labrador, and settled into my home office. Around 10, my phone began vibrating every few seconds. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was another group chat arguing about fantasy football. Then Gus pounded on my front door so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "Ethan, what happened? You've gone viral." I stared at him. "I've gone what?" He shoved his phone into my hands. The screen showed an aerial photograph taken from directly above my house. From the street, my roof still looked like a perfectly ordinary beige roof. From the sky... Karen's face smiled back thousands of times. The photographer had unknowingly captured the entire mosaic in breathtaking detail. Every tiny photograph aligned perfectly with the next, creating the strangest optical illusion anyone had ever seen. The caption simply read, "Someone really, really dislikes their HOA president." The comments were absolute chaos. I zoomed in thinking it was AI. This belongs in a museum. Imagine being the woman on that roof. This is either genius or insanity. Thousands of people couldn't stop sharing it. Neither could the local neighborhood pages. By lunchtime, people were slowly driving past my house, not to block traffic or cause trouble, but simply because curiosity had become stronger than common sense. Most stayed inside their cars. Some parked quietly across the street and looked through binoculars. Every few minutes, someone laughed. Nobody said a word to me. They didn't need to. Karen found out just after noon. I knew the exact moment because my phone rang 6 consecutive times. I didn't answer. Then came 4 voicemails, then 7 more calls. Finally, she stormed onto my driveway so fast she forgot to close her SUV door. "What have you done?" I calmly looked up from washing my truck. "Good afternoon." "Don't play innocent." "Innocent about what?" "My face." I looked around theatrically. "I only see one." She pointed toward the roof with a trembling finger. "My photographs." "Oh. You covered your roof with my face." "I covered it with weatherproof decals." "You admitted it." "I admitted their decals." "You've made me a laughingstock." I folded my arms. "You approved the roof yourself." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "You tricked me. I followed your written notice. I ordered you to repaint the roof. You ordered it to appear an approved color. It does." She looked up. From the driveway, the roof still appeared completely beige. Normal, boring, exactly what she'd demanded. She knew the truth, but she couldn't actually prove the roof looked anything else from ground level. "You'll remove them." "Why?" "Because they're offensive." "To whom?" "To me." I nodded thoughtfully. I wasn't aware HOA regulations protected personal feelings. For a moment, she looked genuinely speechless. Then she marched back to her SUV. This isn't over. It usually isn't. She slammed the door hard enough to make a bird fly out of a nearby tree. Gus appeared from nowhere less than 10 seconds later. I give her a 6 out of 10. For what? Door slam. I thought it was at least an 8. The finger-pointing lost points. We both laughed. Unfortunately, Karen wasn't laughing anymore. She spent the next 3 days desperately trying to erase the photograph from the internet. She emailed neighborhood groups demanding removal. They politely refused. She reported social media posts. New ones appeared twice as fast. She even contacted the drone photographer. Unfortunately for her, he owned the copyright to the image and politely informed her that the photograph had become his best-selling landscape print in company history. He titled it Suburban Persistence. That made things much worse. Karen became obsessed. She started walking past my house twice a day with binoculars. She borrowed a ladder from the HOA maintenance shed and tried examining the roof from different angles. One afternoon, she even climbed onto the clubhouse balcony with opera glasses. Every attempt ended the same way. From anywhere inside the neighborhood, the roof remained perfectly beige. Only high above the houses did the thousands of tiny photographs reveal themselves. That should have ended the argument. Instead, Karen made the biggest mistake of her presidency. She called an emergency HOA board meeting. Not to discuss my roof, to discuss me. She believed she finally had a way to force me into losing. She had no idea she'd just handed me exactly what I'd been waiting for. Emergency HOA meetings usually attracted the same dozen retirees who considered free coffee the evening's main event. This one was different. Every chair in the clubhouse filled before the meeting even started. Homeowners stood along the walls, whispering to one another while pretending not to glance at me. Karen sat at the center of the long board table with a thick binder in front of her, and an expression that suggested she'd finally cornered a criminal mastermind. She looked far too confident, which usually meant she had overlooked something obvious. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, tapping her gavel dramatically, "this emergency session concerns deliberate harassment of an elected HOA official." Half the room exchanged confused looks. She held up a large aerial photograph of my roof. Several people gasped. Others immediately pulled out their phones to compare it with the version they'd already seen online. One teenager in the back whispered, "That's actually kind of awesome." His grandmother elbowed him. Karen ignored them. Mr. Ethan Cole intentionally used my image thousands of times to humiliate me publicly. I stood. "May I respond?" "You'll have your turn." She spent nearly 20 minutes explaining how embarrassed she felt. She described strangers recognizing her at grocery stores, children laughing when she attended the farmer's market. Someone had even mailed the HOA office a birthday card, covered with tiny printed copies of her face. "I have become the target of public ridicule," she declared. For the first time that evening, I actually felt a little sympathy. Not enough to regret what I'd done, but enough to realize she truly hated being laughed at. Then Karen made another mistake. The board should immediately order Mr. Cole to remove every image. One board member raised his hand. "On what rule?" Karen froze. "The harassment clause." He slowly flipped through the governing documents. "I've read that clause." "So?" "It covers threatening behavior." "Exactly. I don't see a threat." "It doesn't have to be a threat. Another board member leaned forward. I don't believe we have a rule against someone displaying photographs they legally own. Karen's smile disappeared. It's obviously harassment. The elderly treasurer quietly adjusted his glasses. Personally, everyone looked toward him. I think it's unusual. He paused. But unusual isn't automatically prohibited. Karen stared at him in disbelief. You can't be serious. I'm trying to follow the documents. She looked around the table. One by one, every board member avoided eye contact. Not because they supported me, because none of them could find a single written rule I'd actually broken. Finally, Karen pointed directly at me. You manipulated the wording. No. You exploited a technicality. I followed the notice exactly as written. You embarrassed me. I nodded. That part happened naturally. Several people accidentally laughed. Karen slammed her gavel. Order! Unfortunately, once laughter starts spreading through a room, it's almost impossible to stop. Even the board secretary covered her mouth. The atmosphere completely changed. Karen no longer looked powerful. She looked flustered, desperate. That's when I reached into my backpack. I brought something. Karen immediately frowned. What now? I thought everyone deserved to see why this happened. I placed 2 large poster boards on easels. The first displayed the original violation notice. The second showed a high-resolution photograph Karen herself had signed during the roof inspection. Right beside her signature were the words, Approved. Violation resolved. Silence settled across the clubhouse. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Everyone read the documents for themselves. The same board member who had questioned the harassment rule slowly looked toward Karen. You approved this roof? It looked different from the ground. But you approved it. I didn't know. You signed it. She rubbed her temples. It was deceptive. The treasurer sighed. I don't think we're discussing deception anymore. What are we discussing? We're discussing why an 8-year-old roof suddenly became unacceptable. Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. A woman sitting in the audience quietly stood up. My green shutters were cited last month. Another neighbor raised his hand. I was fined because my bird feeder was too shiny. Someone else spoke from the back. My mailbox flag was apparently confrontational. The room erupted. Homeowners who had stayed silent for years suddenly started sharing stories. Violation after violation. Fine after fine. Absurd complaint after absurd complaint. Karen repeatedly banged the gavel. Nobody listened anymore. For nearly 20 minutes, she completely lost control of the meeting. Then something unexpected happened. A quiet voice came from the last row. It belonged to 12-year-old Lucy, who had attended with her parents. She raised one simple question. If everyone keeps talking about Karen's face, the room became quiet again. Doesn't that technically make Ethan's roof the most successful neighborhood landmark we've ever had? For 1 second, nobody reacted. Then the entire clubhouse burst into laughter. Even several board members couldn't hold it in. Karen's face turned the exact shade of my original orange roof. Without saying another word, she gathered her binder, stood up, and walked straight out of the meeting while dozens of tiny smiles from the aerial photograph still stared back at her from the projector screen behind the board table. The emergency meeting ended without a single vote. But the story was about to take one final, completely unexpected turn. By the next morning, Oak Ridge Hills felt strangely quiet. No violation notices appeared under anyone's doormat. No HOA SUV crawled through the neighborhood looking for imaginary problems. Karen's curtains stayed closed. For the first time in years, people watered their flowers without wondering if someone was taking pictures from across the street. I figured the whole thing was finally over. I was wrong. 3 evenings later, someone rang my doorbell just after sunset. Standing on my porch was Karen. Alone. No clipboard, no binder, no oversized sunglasses. She looked exhausted. For several awkward seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she held up a plain white envelope. "I'm not here to argue." I accepted it. Inside was a cashier's check. $500, the exact amount of the fine she'd issued me. "What is this?" "My mistake." I looked at her. "You don't seem like someone who enjoys admitting mistakes." "I don't." Another long silence settled between us. "I've spent 3 nights reading every complaint I've approved during the last 2 years," she said quietly. "There were a lot." There were. I convinced myself I was protecting property values. And now? She glanced toward my roof. "I forgot people actually live here." That wasn't the apology I'd expected. It sounded real, almost. Then she sighed. "Would you—" She hesitated. "Consider removing the roof?" I smiled. "I thought you'd never ask." For the first time since I'd met her, Karen looked completely confused. "You will?" "I never wanted your face on my house forever." "You didn't?" "No." "Then why spend weeks putting it there?" "Because nothing else made you stop." She lowered her eyes. There wasn't much left to say. A week later, Gus helped me peel away every tiny photograph. Thousands upon thousands of weatherproof decals came off one by one. The original cedar orange shingles appeared underneath exactly as they had before, untouched. Beautiful. When we finished, Gus leaned against the ladder and laughed. "You know." "What?" "That roof was famous. It had its 15 minutes. I'm almost going to miss Tiny Karen." "I definitely won't," he chuckled. "You keeping one?" I reached into my pocket. I kept 2. One stayed inside my garage toolbox. The other found its way into a small picture frame hanging above my workbench. Not because I wanted revenge, because every now and then, it's healthy to remember what happens when someone mistakes authority for common sense. As for Karen, she surprised everyone. She resigned as HOA president 2 months later. Not because anyone forced her, because she admitted she wasn't the right person for the job anymore. The new board quietly removed dozens of vague rules that had caused years of unnecessary arguments. Meetings became shorter. Fines became rare. Neighbors actually started talking to one another again, instead of peeking through their blinds. And every once in a while, a visitor would ask someone at the community entrance, "Isn't this the neighborhood with the famous roof?" Someone would usually smile and answer, "You just missed it." The story became neighborhood folklore, not because of thousands of tiny photographs, but because one ridiculous idea reminded an entire community that rules should serve people, not the other way around. Thank you for spending your time with Sovereign Verdict. If you enjoy original HOA stories where clever thinking beats pointless power, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next unforgettable showdown.